Welcome back to the moonlit meadow, a place of comfort and rest. Tonight, I invite you to enjoy a story written and recorded by BendingSilverSpoons. Feel free to grab a blanket, pillow, or your favorite items to rest and settle in as you are wrapped in comfort and relaxation. Once upon a time, there was a little wolf named Leon. He was the smallest of his pack, a bit clumsy, and quite often was being scolded for causing mischief. Leon spent his days having fun and trying to grow up to be big and strong like his siblings and parents. He'd often whine and not want to go to bed on time or beg to go on adventures. He didn't know why everyone was so content with being so boring all the time. Eat, sleep, hunt, howl, groom, repeat. He often wished life would be a bit more exciting. But one day, a large storm blew in, and the skies opened up, and rain poured down in the forest where Leon and his family lived. His mother took all the pups and told them to go inside the den where they usually slept. But soon the lightning started, and the thunder rumbled so loudly that it shook the walls where they lived. Leon was scared. They had never had a storm like that before, and he was quite little and unsure of what was happening. The thunder rumbled and rolled. The rain was so intense that the burrow they lived in started to flood. Leon was the smallest of his siblings, and when they heard their dad howl to find higher ground, they all hurried and scampered out of the den. Leon tried to crawl out, pawing at the water and mud, but he kept sliding back down. He yipped and yapped and yelped for his mom, and finally she appeared. She grabbed him by the nape of his neck. She pulled him out of the den and to safety. He was breathless, wet, and was covered in mud and grime. She told him to stay close. They needed to go to higher ground, or else a large river of water called a flash flood might sweep them all away. Leon had never seen such big puddles everywhere. If he hadn't been so scared, he would have thought splashing around in them would have been a lot of fun. But he barely thought that thought before he saw a large flash of light, followed by a loud snap and crunch, and a huge tree in front of his family lit up as if it was glowing. Lightning. Fire. The tree had been struck. With a large crack and wheeze, the tree began to split and fall. His family was trying to get beyond it and howled, "Run!" His brothers and sisters all dashed forward, as did his mom and dad. But Leon was scared. He started to run forward, but then he could see how the tree was starting to split, and he knew for sure he would be crushed. So he stopped, and he hesitated, and by then it was too late. The large tree fell, and and his family was on one side, Leon on the other. He yipped and called for their attention, but his calls were not heard over the sound of rushing water. A large river of water started to fly by, and before he knew it, he was being carried off by the current. Leon was never a very good swimmer. There wasn't much water around typically, definitely not deep enough to swim in. Poor Leon struggled to paddle and tread the water as it twisted and turned and flowed downstream. This was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Granted, he was still just a pup and cub, but still, he knew that this wasn't normal, and he was scared that he could get carried all the way to the ocean, or worse. He saw rabbits and mice and other little creatures get carried away with him. There was mud and there were leaves floating all around him. He kept getting stuck with branches, and he would yelp and try to pull away. He wondered, why was this happening? What made the sky so angry all of a sudden? And why in the world did he hesitate when his mom said to run? Oh boy, he thought. His siblings were never going to let him hear the end of it. They were going to tease him for being slow. His dad would be angry that he didn't follow instructions. His mom would be worried and disappointed. He was just too little and too scared, and he didn't want to run. But now he was all alone, and even if they did yell at him, all he wanted more than anything was to see them again. The current kept pulling him, and he was getting awfully tired. He saw a large log floating down with such speed. It was heading right for him. He wasn't sure what to do, but he decided he should do something. Another couple minutes, and he wouldn't have the strength to keep going. He would end up slipping beneath the surface, or worse. To keep from drowning, when the log came flying by, Leon leapt towards it, paddling as much as he could and digging in his sharp little claws. He managed to sink them into the wood, and he clung on for dear life. The log kept him from falling back deep into the water and allowed him to rest his muscles and legs. He didn't know how long he'd been in the water, but he had to keep holding on. He started to feel so tired after a while. Much time had passed. Everything had been so scary, and he wasn't really sure what had happened and what he imagined. All he knew was he didn't have his family with him anymore. He was all alone. He was hungry. He wasn't able to recognize anything around him. He started to howl and cry and hoped that his family would hear him. After some time, the little wolf's voice was all worn out, and his yelps were nothing more than whispers. He felt defeated. His eyes slowly closed as the exhaustion overtook him. Just a limp little wolf floating down a flash flood stream on a rough log. It was much later in the day when the little wolf woke up. He realized that he wasn't moving anymore, and he looked up and all around. He wondered where he was. He blinked many times and took it all in. He was in a forest, but he wasn't sure where. There were large trees around him, debris everywhere, so much mud and branches and acorns scattered around. He tried to stand up, his little legs shaking so much, but he managed to steady himself and get off the log and take a few steps forward. He missed his family. He was scared. He didn't know where they could be. Did they forget about him? Maybe they weren't even trying to find him. Maybe something happened to them. His tummy was rumbling and he was shivering. Leon was so cold after being wet for ages, and the sun setting made the air so chilly. He looked around for anywhere he could find shelter. He saw a little hole and tried there, but he couldn't even fit in his nose. It must have been a chipmunk hole. Next, he found a little drooped area surrounded by dense greens, but he couldn't fit in there either. And when he tried, he came across a bunch of little rabbits. They all yelled not to crush them. Leon apologized and told them he was just looking for a safe place to rest, that he was lost and cold and hungry. They exchanged glances at the word hungry. They seemed extra nervous, but Leon didn't understand why. The little bunnies looked young, and they said that they were hungry too, and they didn't know where their mom went. They just knew she said not to move from that spot. Leon knew now how important it was to listen to his mom, and he told the little rabbits they should stay put. That way their mom could find them again. He decided to wander more and happened upon the mother rabbit and told her where the babies were. She was so grateful, and he led her back to their spot. The mama rabbit thanked Leon and told him that her eyes weren't very good, and the rain had washed away the scent she usually used to keep track of her babies. She said that she was a little scared seeing Leon, since wolves and rabbits don't normally get along, but she realized he was just as scared as her. She asked what a young cub was doing in the forest all alone. Leon couldn't help but tear up when he told the mama rabbit all about his mishaps. She told him to gather some big leaves and bring them over, and she helped to cover him up. She told him he could sleep there for the night and gave him some small berries to eat. It wasn't much, but he was a little warmer, and his tummy wasn't grumbling too loud. All night he was in and out of sleep and kept having nightmares about the water rushing in and carrying him away. He dreamed that his family was having a big feast, warm and inside. All of them were laughing, and no one was even looking for him. The mama rabbit awoke him because he was crying in his sleep. He told her about the dreams, and she sat down and put her paw on his. She told him to please not think that way, that she was sure his family loved him very much, and she was sure that they were worried sick, just like she was worried when she couldn't find her babies. In the morning, she said she'd help Leon try to look for them. Leon slowly nodded and drifted back to sleep. The bunny's paw on his made him feel a little less cold and scared. In the morning, they set off to find his family. Leon looked high and low and everywhere he could, but there was no sign of them. Even the bunny mama was feeling discouraged. Little Leon went down a path and recognized it. This was the path that led to the Howling Stone, the place where they always practiced their big howls. He walked closer and closer to the big rock. He was nervous. He was too little and had never been allowed to step up on the big rock before. But he was desperate, and he needed to be brave. The big rock was positioned perfectly so that when they howled, it carried along the wind and echoed all around. Leon gathered his strength and bravery, and he let out a big "Awoo! Awoo!" getting louder each time. All around him his howls echoed. "Awoo! Awoo! Awoo!" But he didn't hear any howls in return. He kept going until he couldn't howl anymore. Defeated, he curled up on the howling rock and accepted that he really was going to be alone forever. He'd never see his family again. But when the wind began to blow, he heard an ever so faint howl. He shook his head in fur. He must have been imagining it. But there it was again, a bit stronger this time. He looked all around, and he started to howl too. Desperate, hopeful howls. He could hear rustling and turned around just as his mom and dad and brothers and sisters burst through the brush and bushes. They all yelled, "Leon! Leon! Leon!" His family all surrounded him, nuzzling him and grooming his face and tackling him for hugs. They told him they were so worried about him. They thought they'd lost him. Leon, with tears in his eyes, asked, "You mean you really wanted to find me, even though I always cause trouble?" Leon's mother looked at him sternly and asked how he could say such a thing. She pressed her head against his and said right to him, "We love you. We will always find you. We will always be there to hold you close and make sure you are safe. With us, this is your home. Always. Never forget that. We've been so scared, and now we're so relieved and happy that you're okay." They all gathered around in a big hug and held on tight, all of their tails wagging happily. It would take time to rebuild, but they were together and they were safe, and everything else would fall into place with some hard work and patience. Snuggled in warm and dry, Leon realized just how lucky he was. He wouldn't complain anymore, and he'd make sure that he would never take his family for granted again. He curled up closer to his family, and the exhaustion took over. Soon he was lightly snoring and dreaming happy dreams about the people who cared about him the most. Leon was safe and sound and loved, and he slept soundly through the night. The end. I hope that you enjoyed this story and that you're all wrapped up in your blankets and ready to drift to sleep. You're safe and sound, and you can rest now, knowing you're surrounded by comfort and that there are people who care about you in this world. You can rest and relax now. Rest and relax. The moonlit meadow will always be here to help chase away bad dreams and help you get to sleep each night. I hope that you enjoyed this story. And good night, good night, good night.